So this amazing photo montage is by German artist Höch, and it's from 1919 to about 1920, and it has an extremely long title. Cut with the Kitchen Knife, Dada through the last Weimar beer belly cultural epic of Germany. And it was displayed in the first International Dada Fair.
1919, 1920, that was a really pretty fraught moment. So what was going on?
Political chaos.
Okay.
Which really
Well, she seems to have captured that.
She has captured it.
In what way? What kind of political chaos?
In many ways. Well, the government has been completely changed after World War I. There's a lot of conflict between the Spartacists, which is the far left-wing communists, okay. Some of which of those people are featured in this. There are conflicts between those groups and the Freikorps. And the Freikorps was sort of encouraged to attack people by members of the government. So there are all these clashes, and a lot of people end up getting arrested, and some people end up getting killed. And that's just one particular moment. That's January of 1919. All of that infighting happens.
So all this fragmentation is just beautifully captured here. The contrast from the kind of long war, which would have really focused the country's attention, and then this complete breakdown.
Right.
It's just, the contrast is just stunning.
So it's really a sort of tabula rasa here, blank
Although
slate.
It's not, otherwise there wouldn't have been a Second World War.
Otherwise
Right?
it would not have, well, it's true, that's a very important point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little pieces that are left over, and that's exactly what Höch is working with here. All the political players are left, and there's all this tension between them. You know, if you think about the title, Cut with a Kitchen Knife, think about the idea of cutting things, literally, right? That works for the photo montage. And she's sort of cutting a swath through all this and kind of piecing things back together in ways that make sense to her. Focusing on the fragmentation as defining culture at that moment.
But I love that it's a photo montage, and I'm assuming most of these photographs came from newspapers, from magazines.
They did.
And so it's all immediate and topical and all relevant at this moment, but it's being reconstructed.
But I love that it's a kitchen knife.
She's very focused also on the role of women artists. She talked a lot about it, and she wrote a lot about it. As a Dadaist, how was she treated? And she wasn't treated very well. I think one of the things she actually had a problem with is a lot of male Dadaists, you know, had grand ideas about changing cultural mores and views and gender equity, but then in their practice of that, they did nothing. There's a couple of ways that that is visualized here. If we look at sort of the very central image, we actually see one of the foremost German expressionist artists, Katja Kollwitz.
And it's also been severed.
And the body underneath her is dancer Nidhi Impekoven. And if you look at the way that that forms a kind of central point around which everything else rotates, and there is a sense of movement happening all at the same time.
Well, I noticed a lot of wheels
there are
and
a lot of
gears
wheels
and a sense of the mechanical.
So
and
this is a
cog
huge
wheels.
machine.
It's a machine. If you think about like the machinery of
Government,
the machinery of culture, of you know, if you think of the machine itself, even the machine of Dada.
But the machine to me it has a very male connotation to it.
Well, one thing I always think is really interesting to point out is if we zoom in and look in the far right lower corner, we're going to go down, and this tiny little head right here is actually Höch. Instead of putting her signature, she puts a little portrait of herself. And what it is actually pasted onto the corner of a map, which shows the countries in Europe that had women's voting rights at the time. So that's one of the ways that we know she was thinking about the role of women in society and in the art world. One of the best ways to deal with a picture of the scale where there's so much happening is to look at this other version that I actually annotated.
So we're in Flickr now.
We're in Flickr right now, and so I created this image which has a lot of notes
and
on
you can,
it.
if you want to see this, you can just go into the Smart History group in Flickr.
And you can find this image. And then what happens is we wave over it and we see all these different things. Okay, so first of all, if you think about this image in terms of quadrants, so there's an upper right and a lower right, and a lower left and an upper left. Now, I've decided to name the left side, even though they're not usually named. Usually it's the right side is known as the anti-Dadaists. And if you look, she's called that. The anti-Dadaist, right over here.
Okay.
Right, so she's cut out a lot of text as well, and that's up here. Now, the people that are in the anti-Dadaist corner are obviously politicians. So there's and former politicians. Kaiser Wilhelm is right here. His head is really big, and this figure is quite large.
Okay.
And Kaiser Wilhelm has been deposed.
He's abdicated. I think he's in Holland.
Okay.
So he's left
And
the country.
he's led the country into World
Yes,
War One.
into disaster.
Right.
Yeah, so he's gone.
Okay, just want to be clear
yep,
who he was.
Yep, so
Not a nice man.
not a nice man, and there's a lot of satire, heavy satire going on in this. So then there are also other political figures. There's General von Hindenburg, the head of him, on the body of this exotic dancer.
So she took a male general and put him on the female body and sort of castrated him in a way.
She makes fun of Kaiser Wilhelm with this little figure of two wrestlers that are creating the mustache. Down here, there is German Minister of Defense, Gustav Noska, and he's talking to another general over here, and this general up here is standing on their heads.
So another man who led them into war.
Yeah.
Sort of like the Donald Rumsfeld.
Yes,
the
yes.
Secretary
So
of
if you
Defense.
think about if you think about pictures of our contemporary U.S.
And these are people who
cabinet
are really
members
being
and
held
politicians.
responsible at this moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And some of them
yeah.
were still in power. And they were sort of working with, reformulating the government, which
Right.
is not, there's in no way any sense of organization. Fragmented in many ways, and all these people are sort of grasping for power that they did have before,
Right.
and trying to figure out ways to pull the country together. But if we go down here, in the lower right corner, we see the world of the Dadaist. It's Die Welt of Dada, and right here it says Dadaisten, right there.
Uh-huh.
So this is the corner that has Hannah Höch and the map. And then it also has other Dadaist figures. There's the Dadaist Raoul Hausmann. Hannah Höch had a relationship with Hausmann for a while, not her whole life, and for a long time all of the literature on Höch focused on her relationship.
Right, of
She was
course.
always referred to as the wife of Raoul Hausmann.
What's
Very
interesting is that visually, the bottom right corner, the Dadaist corner, is much less dense
It is.
and
There's a lot.
heavy.
You can
than-
see the figures.
yeah.
Here you see the two heads of Dadaist George Gross and Wieland Herzfeld. And this is actually Wieland Herzfeld is the brother of John Hartfield. John Hartfield
right.
changed his
Of
name.
course.
He anglicized his name. And Nidhi Impekoven, the same dancer that's in the center here, is now over here bathing John Hartfield in this bathtub.
She seems to be demeaning men.
Yeah, she is. I think very
Often.
specifically, sort of trying to reverse as much
Power
as she,
relations.
Yeah, power relations as much as she can. In here we have sort of in the center, Lenin is over here, kind of in the center. You can't really see it right now. And then there's another Dadaist, Johannes Bader. And then you see one of the Communist Party leaders, Karl Radek, and he was back and forth between Russia and Germany. So he's very involved with the Communist Party, Germany. So those three together is Karl Marx, because we always have to have Marx. Then over here is the head of modern art critic and writer Theodor Daubler, and his head is on top of a baby's body, big fat baby's body, which is pretty
huge
funny.
baby's body.
Huge baby's body.
I love that
and it's
idea.
backwards. It's pretty funny.
So really infantilizing all of these people.
And then they're all men. Cause, I mean, all these Dadaists
And
are
her
men.
colleague.
What I've decided is that on the left side is their forms of Dada. This is Dada propaganda. This is Einstein right here, actually. And he is saying a couple of different things. Right here, this little bit of text is in German. And it says, "Hehe, young man, Dada is not an art trend." That it's not just something that's coming and going, and that it's actually something more meaningful, and that it's about...
Serious.
It's
More
serious, and it's
substantive
more
and-
substantive.
Political
Yep.
and worldly and timely.
And up in the corner, this is another thing. This is, if you think about
your
money
money
and
in
Dada,
Dada.
right? These are sort of propagandistic
That's
messages
great.
designed to kind of tap into the idea of art making as a money venture, as an investment,
But it's also clearly absurdist.
she's mocking the entire venture. Now down here, there's a lot of scenes of mass gathering. So we see in the center here, this figure.
Karl Liebknecht.
This is Karl Liebknecht, one of the German Communist Party leaders, along with Rosa Luxemburg, who were, as it says there, jailed, tortured, and then assassinated in January 19. That was a moment that really sort of brought together...
Galvanized the left.
Galvanized the left. I mean, these are all photographs that she's taken out of the popular press. So she's taken that figure of him, and right here, he's saying, join Dada. So this is why I think it's like a kind of Dada persuasion. These are persuasive messages,
Yeah.
right? And then this is all like about...
Resist the...
Resist.
And after all, these images came out of a commercial magazine. It was
Product magazines
Absolutely.
also, and popular women's journals, and then the Berliner Illustrierte Zeitung, which is the illustrated press of Berlin.
Dada had only been around for a couple of years at this point, right? For just a few years, and so how is this being received? What kind of audience did this have?
Well, this had the audience of other Dadaists in Berlin. Dada is going on kind of all over Europe, and there are different centers of Dada. So there's a Dada movement in Paris, and there's a Dada movement in Zurich.
New
There's
York.
a
Cologne.
New York, Cologne,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Hanover,
Right.
and in Berlin. And they all kind of have different kind of art making practices. And photo montage was central to the Berlin Dadaist things.
What does the last Weimar beer belly cultural epic mean?
Abundance and gluttony and beer, of course, being very, to me, very German, having the beer belly and sort of those last vestiges of that bourgeois.
Wealthy kind of stable culture that had allowed the First World War to really happen. There were some artists that were actually looking at traditional painting as having been, in some ways, responsible for the violence of the war, responsible for the culture that could have produced this war. And art having some sort
holding up those values.
holding up those values, exactly,
Sort
right,
of
being
the
a commodity of
Right. And art does
of
do that,
elitism
you know.
that would have allowed for the kind of hierarchy to create this kind of
Or
violence.
the kind of armchair bourgeois.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Art.
precisely right. And what is art's responsibility within that cultural framework?
In the upper right, we have a kind of political establishment, but on the lower left, we have the masses.
The masses, and
right.
that's a huge contrast.
Right.
And sort of that tension remains,
with
obviously.
Dada sort of cutting a swath in a way.
Right.
Right.
And she's cutting
Through
it
the
across
beer,
there.
right through the beer belly.
Right.
Right,
the
from the
belly.
word Dada in the upper left through the word Dada again in the lower right, and her own self-portrait with Kollwitz in the middle there. It's very interesting.
Dividing those classes. Yeah.
Women, in a way.
And women are, I think, she puts in places of power, or at least as a destabilizing force.
Well, the whole notion of the kitchen knife
Right.
is really empowering.
The
in
idea
that
of
sense,
domesticity
right?
as being
That's right.
something that could undermine cultural values.
Yeah,
It's an
absolutely.
amazing
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I love it.
I love it.
It's cool.